Welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. This is a non-judgmental place to explore spirituality, and we're so glad you're here. This is a viewer and listener supported podcast, so we greatly appreciate your support. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Be sure and like, share, and subscribe to any of the social media content platforms that you're using. And then if you go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, you can make a one-time donation, or with a monthly subscription, you'll gain access to our bonus content. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome everybody to Spirituality Adventures. Thanks for joining us today. And we are on with Aaron Scarbrough.
Yo.
Aaron is a comedian from Kansas City. And we have just recently met. Matt, my producer, actually didn't introduce us, but just connected us. He said, you ought to check out Aaron. So I've never had a comedian on the podcast.
Well, you picked a hell of a first one.
And so we connected, had coffee. I tried to stalk you a little bit on Instagram and your podcast and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But I've enjoyed it. It's been fun.
Thank you.
If you're driving around with your kids, I don't know what topic is going to come up, but it might be R-rated. I don't know. You might need to think about that, but I'm not sure what's going to come up. We're just going to talk.
Neither am I. I can't promise that. I make no promises. So
yeah. All right, so let's have you just do a quick introduction. Like where you grew up, where you're from, all that kind of background.
So I grew up in Fairfax, Missouri, which is this tiny little town up in the northwest corner of the state. I grew up there, went to college 30 minutes from there in Maryville, Missouri. I was an art major, and I got my art degree and then spent the next few years in call centers and working in the dairy industry briefly as well. And now I'm a self-employed comedian and painter as well. And now I'm here.
Yeah. So Fairfax, how many people live in Fairfax?
So
is that the name of it? Fairfield?
Fairfax.
Okay. Fairfax. It's a small town outside of St. Joe or something?
Well, it's about an hour from St. Joe, but okay. Yeah, it's like, it was like 600 people whenever I left. And that was, 11 years ago or something. So, and current population is still 673. Really? Okay. Well,
how big's the high school? Your graduating class?
12. I had 12 in my graduating class.
Were you the valedictorian?
No, but I made top 5.
There you go. That's impressive.
Sure.
When I went to Baylor, it's like every person I met was a valedictorian, and I was finally started going like, so how big was your class?
Right.
Like 11. Okay.
Yeah, you got to be careful of that. Yeah.
So, what were your influences there? Talk about small town Missouri and like what was that like growing up? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you want to get out of it?
I would say that I hated it pretty definitively. There were good moments while I was watching Lord of the Rings, basically, but other than that, I don't think that I had I wasn't stoked back then, but I grew up in the church, and by that I mean the Southern Baptist tradition.
I know that tradition.
Yes. Yeah, so I've heard. But yeah, I did that for a long time.
So was this like your parents took you to church regularly?
Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
were there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, kind of.
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole time, definitely Sunday school and then Sunday church, most of the time Sunday evening church, and, I'd say half the time Wednesday night church. And then that turned into youth group. And then shortly after that, I stopped playing ball.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Did you ever like it?
The church?
Yeah.
I did, or I thought that I did, you just, it's just like everything else that's ingrained into you. Christmas is fun, and I bought into it for sure, until probably, I don't know, 18, 19.
So you got saved in a Southern?
Yes, when I was a kid.
You're Southern Baptist, you get baptized.
Yes.
Well,
I had nightmares all the time about going to hell, and in the Baptist church they kind of remind you about hell a lot, and so I would have nightmares. I was like, what if I die before I get baptized? And all that stuff. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, but
I was when I was 14, 15, 16, I was doing a lot of recreational drugs. And it was kind of, didn't want to be going to church.
Sure.
But my parents were taking me to church, and I remember a prayer I had every night. If I was like stoned, I was like, Jesus, don't come back yet.
Right. Yeah. It's horrifying.
Because I watched this movie that they showed in the youth group called Thief in the Night.
Oh, really? Like the original Left Behind.
Yeah, like it's the precursor to that. And it's like the rapture happens and all the Christians are gone.
Right.
And you're left behind.
Sure.
And it's not good.
Yeah. That was the scariest thing in the world, just being left by your parents. And I grew up with Left Behind as well.
Yeah.
The Kirk
Did
Cameron
you see that
movies.
growing up, Matt? The movie? Yeah, his dad was a Baptist pastor, so.
Okay.
He's a PK kid.
Yeah.
My mom and dad were out in the backyard talking to our neighbor, and I got out of the shower. My mom and dad's clothes were folded on the foot of their bed.
Oh.
I was like, oh my God, it happened. And that was like the first panic attack ever. I lost it. I was like 10.
Yeah. I don't know.
So there is some trauma that can happen.
Sure. It's not juicy trauma.
No.
Although I do have, you want to talk about, I do have an experience that kind of, like this single event kind of, if I could describe one event that this is how I feel about myself and my relationship to the church. So when I was 16, I was a skateboarder, and I would drive out to Maryville, where I wound up going to school. I was allowed to go a couple nights a week, and I would just skate until the sun went down and then drive home. The skate park, mostly.
Which one?
In Maryville.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And I started talking to this girl, and she was this little short, like she was Hawaiian, and she had blue hair, and we started dating, and
in college, when you were at college?
No, this was when I was in high school.
Okay.
So this wound up being my first sexual experience.
Okay.
And I still had a bunch of religious guilt. She was offering to do like a sexual favor on me, and there was this interesting like conversation, because like I wanted to do it or whatever, but I was like, I felt horrible because in the Baptist church you're taught that like you're not supposed to do anything until you're married or whatever. Anyway.
Yeah.
We started going at it.
You're not supposed to not only do anything, you're not supposed to think about it.
Not even think about it.
Right. Which is a real tragic.
That's
thing.
That's interesting. That's an interesting challenge to give a teenage boy.
'Cause the stats on this are like, if you know, how often do teenage boys, 20-year-old boys, 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 60-year-old boys think about sex? And like, it's pretty much every minute on the minute.
Right. Sure.
And think about like, then, okay, so this is my shame-based sexual ethic that I grew up with. God made sex. It's good for you. And if you're in a heterosexual marriage, you can do it.
Yeah.
But if you're not in a heterosexual marriage, you can't do it.
Right.
And you can't think about it.
Yes, that's exactly what.
And I'm like, so how many people in the world, as long as Homo sapiens have been in existence, did that ethic actually work for?
No one. There wouldn't be anyone. Yeah.
Anyway, it's just but it does create enormous shame about your own sexuality. It's like, holy crap.
For sure.
I can't even think about this stuff. I'm doomed to hell for sure now, because I think about it all the time.
Yeah.
So here's your first experience with guilt, shame, and then this hot chick. Is that maybe we shouldn't say that, but anyway. Well,
no, I mean, like, in context, yes, we're talking about teenage Aaron. Like, he was like, yes, this is a good, first experience. But in the middle of it, I was like, I felt too bad, and I was like, can we stop? I called it off. Now, the next day at school, I, of course, went around telling everyone who would listen, I got my first blowjob. And that was whatever. I was bragging about it. And then at the end of the day, I had the daughter of my youth pastor came up to me. And she said, hey, I don't know what's going on. And in my mind, I was like, oh, you heard, And she was like, I don't know what's going on, but my dad got a voicemail from you last night that lasted like 10 minutes. And I don't know what was said on it, but I know he's about to contact your parents.
What?
I had one of those slider phones. Like, you remember those little Motorola's?
Yeah.
I had one of those, and those were so easy to pocket dial. And I had my youth minister's number.
Holy crap.
I called him, and that whole exchange was on his voicemail.
Oh, my gosh.
So, yeah, he wound up, my parents found out. And so...
I've never heard a story like this.
I know.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and I know.
That could be your most crazy story.
Well, it didn't take place in Kansas City.
Right.
But yeah.
Holy crud.
So, yeah, I say that, I feel like that sums up, like, I don't know, like, that's such an extreme, in hindsight, I think that's such an extreme formative moment, especially with all the shame that I got from my parents. My dad had cancer at the time, and they were like, you're really pulling this shit now, I think that, considering what happened, like, we're fortunate that I'm not a serial killer. I don't know.
Oh my goodness. So at 18 or 19, you head off to Maryville, and did you have a specific in your brain, like I don't want to have anything to do with that Southern Baptist world? Was that like a conscious thing, or did you just kind of drift away from it? Was it more of a hard move away or a drift away?
So the way I describe it is, after... because I was like, number one, they were ashamed of me, and number two, I was ashamed of me after that. So I still had to go to regular church, but I didn't have to go to youth group or Sunday school anymore. And I never talked to that guy again. but in the back of my mind, so that was around the time I started getting into punk rock, and I was very, very into skateboarding. My parents like tried to stifle that artistic side of me as much as possible. Wow. And so yeah, I forgot the question already.
Yeah, well, we were just talking.
Okay, that's right.
So yeah, we're just kind of getting some story. By the way, Matt was a skater quite a bit, and we ended up interviewing Brian Sumner.
Yeah.
You know Brian?
So I don't know him personally, but I know who that is for sure.
Yeah, big skater guy.
Right.
And he is an evangelist now, which was really interesting interview that I did with him a few months ago.
I bet that would be interesting.
Several months ago.
Was he in here?
No. Well, he was in California.
Okay.
He still lives out in California. But it was fun. It was still fun, because we talked. He grew up in Liverpool. He's a Liverpool kid, and he was, I guess, one of my
favorites when I was a kid.
Big on the rails and all that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I thought he was so cool. Jeff Rowley also. He's British, right? Those. Yeah, they were like the punk rock, like. Yeah. I think they both skated for Vans, right?
They both had a thing with Vans. Brian moved to Airwalk, and then.
Right.
They were all over the place. Brian he got big with Birdhouse. He was in the Birdhouse movie.
Right. I remember. Yes, I do remember that. I would probably have fun talking to him too.
It's fun, but he can get really preachy really fast. Right. He does evangelism for a living now.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting. So I was trying to.
You dodging it a little bit.
Yeah, trying to keep him a little bit off of that.
Once again, have me on at the same time.
Yeah, exactly.
You need to. Yeah, you need to have Jesus and Satan represented here.
Well,
am I the first Satanist that you've talked to on here?
Let's see here. I don't know if anybody's declared themselves that.
Right. I never have either. But but it sounds good in the moment. Sure. Yep.
I had one gal who's a rapper here in town who is would have called herself a what was the phrase she used, Matt? I mean, she could have said witch, but kind of
she's Wiccan,
voodoo, and all of that kind of. But she grew up Presbyterian.
Interesting.
Nicolette Page. She's really good. She started out in folk and then went to reggae, and then now she's doing rap hip hop stuff.
No way.
And she does some great meditation stuff as well for urban kids, city, core kids and stuff. She's really fascinating.
Sure.
Fun.
I bet that's an interesting person.
But at any rate, we were just getting your story.
Yeah.
So you got into the punk scene.
Yeah.
Skateboard scene, and you did like a hard exit away from the church scene.
Well, as much as I could. So my folks were very, when you were in the Baptist church, like it was pretty dogmatic as far as like what should a kid be exposed to in media. And my parents kind of tried to raise me, preventing me from getting a hold of, media, basically, that they did not deem non-offensive or whatever you want to call it. And so they encouraged a lot of like Christian bookstore media, although I tried to get into like As I Lay Dying and Under Oath and stuff like that, but they were so conservative about it. They were like, even if it is Christian music, the fact that these bands are screaming and like have dark themes, we don't want, we don't want you looking at that.
So you can't do tooth and nail stuff. You can't do
a Reliant K was fine.
Okay. Yeah.
But I was like,
the Lawrence band, yeah.
Well, yeah, but I was just like, man, I want to listen to the heavy stuff. Everyone's going to think.
I think Reliant K opened for Yellow Card one time.
I'm sure they did. There was lots of crossover.
Interesting, yeah.
That was, I mean, I guess the early 2000s, that was a really good time for Christianity's relationship to capitalism, you know? There was a boom for them. The Christian bookstores, like mega churches, coffee shops, tax exempt corporations, basically. And I think it's still a good time for them. Or it definitely has been since Friday or whatever.
So I'm just thinking about my audience right now and the curve you just took with them.
Oh, I didn't mean to.
No, that's good.
Whatever you guys think is right.
No, this is good. So I did. There's an interesting interview I did just a couple months ago with a guy named Brian McLaren, who did a book called "Do I Stay Christian?"
Okay.
And the first part one of the book is no. There's 10 chapters on all the reasons why you should leave Christianity. Then he does part 2, yes, 10 chapters of why you should stay Christian, kind of all the best parts of Christianity through the years. But in the first part, no, he does a critique of the religious right and capitalism, and so anyway,
by the way,
there's some really
that's an important distinction I want to make. I don't have an issue with the Christian tradition, like as a whole. I know that there are parts of it that I think are beautiful, but that's kind of where I draw the line, because like I came up in that stuff. Mm-hmm. The Bush years. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's good. I don't think it's good for culture. I think it's pretty evil.
Well, we took, and I grew up, Republican, pro-life, and would still be a registered Republican.
Right.
But the Iraq War was like, one of the first things in like, holy crud, what are we doing? Kind of a thing. And and that started my critique. And I would, I think when people listen to me preach, most of the time they couldn't tell if I was Republican or Democrat based on what message I was given in a particular day, because I had a pretty strong social justice platform, which you could have, at times you could have thought, is Fred a pro-immigration?
Right.
Yeah. Is Fred like for universal health care? That's kind of for the poor.
Right.
So I started, and then anyway, I don't like to get super, but you do.
I like talking about it because I don't know.
But golly, the craziness of the last 4 years, 5 years, January 6th, it's nuts.
Right.
I'm like, this is crazy.
It's crazy. This is like, no matter how you look at it.
That shit crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't, so, whoa. Well, so you took kind of you took a turn away from the church. You never really went back to it again.
No.
Okay. And I'm just curious, because I want to get to your comedy career here and talk about, comedy.
For sure.
And that as a career. And your National Prayer Breakfast.
Yeah.
podcast that you just started.
I'm here to recruit new fans.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for prayer warriors.
National Prayer Breakfast is the name of your podcast, which I got to just find out about that too. But at any rate, so you took this hard turn away from the church. Did you keep any part, like any kind of spiritual path at all?
Well, it's impossible to.
And how would you describe it? And then also, I wanted you to just briefly maybe mention about your obsession with NA beers.
Okay. Well, you gave me 14 things that I need to talk about, so let's get started. No. So I believe the first part was just my spiritual journey, or I would say, when I was in college, I took, and please don't throw up, but I took Intro to Philosophy, and that was my first look into just other ways to look at the world, other perspectives that don't come from a Christian tradition. Right. And I started looking at things differently. I remember I had a philosophy professor who I liked a lot. Like I thought he was a cool dude. He was like a leftist, and I was a leftist at that time. I was like looking into Noam Chomsky and shit like that. Mm-hmm. And he kind of explained to me why you don't have to live your life worried that you're going to hell. And it made sense, and that was an amazing feeling. I still remember, like, after he kind of made sense of that to me, just walking out and just thinking, like, the world is beautiful. I still remember it was like an autumn day, and I was like, this feels a lot better. And I'll be honest, I have since forgotten what he said. But I think it's like kind of telling that, like, I've brought up like the concept of hell already, like at least twice. But that's where it all was for me. Mm-hmm. In Christianity, it was about shame and fear. Mm-hmm. And now I look back and I'm like, well, that's to scare people into submission. Mm-hmm. And I don't like that. I will say that you asked if I've brought any of that tradition, and it's impossible to not, when that's a huge part of your life, and people who aren't even raised Christian have Christian based ethics and values, and the lore is just a part of the culture. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's the way I see it, though, like the way that it still has a residual effect in my life, even though I consider myself polar opposite of how I was raised. I still am a sucker for certain aspects of church, the community aspect of it. Getting together with people that you would absolutely never hang out with outside of your house, and just everyone, it's in theory an egalitarian little society. Mm-hmm. It's not there for profit. It's there so that you can get fulfillment. You can help others in your community. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's beautiful. And I still feel that way, like with my comedy and my artwork, like that's all I want to do. Like, I want to make connections with people and just empathize with them, especially when things are hard. It's high-minded and egotistical to consider yourself something like that when you're a comedian, but for real, like,
you want to create community around your work.
Yeah. I want to be appreciated, but I want people to have a good time. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think that there's a Christian like kind of aspect to that.
Yeah. I think there is, and I think when you grow up with these metaphors and it shapes your brain and the stories in your brain. It's kind of like your native language. Even if you learn French or German or something else down the line,
Sure.
English is still kind of like your heart language. And like when you're raised from birth in a particular stream of religious thought,
Right.
well, it could be Hindu, Buddhist, Islam.
Right.
Every kid that's raised in a religious stream of thought, it
Sure.
shapes the stories and the metaphors in our brain.
Absolutely.
And it becomes a lifelong filter of some sort that we try to, change or work against, but it's there. It's
Right.
running, whether we accept it or not, or whether we agree with it or not, or sometimes we transcend it, sometimes we reshape it, tell new stories with it, that kind of thing. I don't know. Anyway, it's interesting.
For sure.
The brain is a story maker, right?
Uh-huh.
It takes all these sensual information loads, creates algorithms, recognizes patterns, and then creates stories. We're story making people, right? So
We are.
it's
Yeah.
fascinating stuff. And it's fun when you can add a little comedy to it as well.
Yeah.
So before we get to the comedy, though, let's talk about NA beers.
NA beers.
What's your
So background, like I just hit 3 years of sobriety from alcohol. I've done some drugs, but
only the best kind?
only the good. Yeah, I mean, like I
Only
like
the good ones.
Yes.
Congratulations, 3 years.
Thank you.
Sobriety
I was
on
waiting for
alcohol.
that. No.
Yeah.
It was
I've almost got 3 years.
really.
I don't have 3 years, but I'm
Right.
I'm getting close.
Well, I'm proud of you. For the most part, like I'm just like a fatty at heart. I want to drink soda all the time, and I don't know, like especially if I'm eating a meal, like I want some sugar to wash it down with, and I don't know, I'm trying to introduce, something different. Just so it's like a new experience, or it's like remembering like the good parts of drinking, basically. Like there's good tasting beers and stuff like that, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with drinking either, I don't think. It's just some of us can't chill.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, I've been doing Hellraiser by it's like what is it? It's some brewery in St. Louis. They have this beer called Hellraiser that's really good. And then I'll even do the cheap one, like the NA PBRs and stuff. That's good too. I'll do it.
All right. Cool. Yeah. Well, so comedy. How did you feel led to get into a comedy career? How did you feel? Was it a sense of just how long have you been doing that?
So July 3rd which is this Sunday, will be 5 years of doing comedy.
Wow.
I got into it, when I first started going to open mics, about a year before I ever went to an open mic, I was visiting a friend in Austin, Texas, and we went to this little comedy festival. And I remember seeing some comedians perform. I thought they were really cool. And then the next day, I was at a brewery, and the same person that was performing was serving me beer. And I was like, wait a second. So comics are just down-to-earth people, I made that connection for the first time in my life, because I had never thought about that. I was like, I assumed they go through like the normal avenues of show business or whatever, and it's like, so
was this like I'm just curious, because I'm pretty naive about the comedian crowd, but like so Joe Rogan I know is in Austin, and then I knew he was a part of the comedy club out in California,
right?
And hadn't he tried to kind of recreate that in Austin to some degree?
Yeah, he's still, as far as I know, he's still working on it. Austin used to have a very well respected club called Cap City, and I think Cap City, it's either coming back or it's back.
Okay.
But Austin, because of its huge population, now they have room for like a few comedy clubs if they want them, because it's become like this haven for comedy. But what was your question about Joe Rogan?
Well, I was just thinking he was trying to kind of recreate a comedy scene in Austin that was similar to the one that he was a part of in California.
Yes. So the Comedy Store is that's the club. That's probably the most famous comedy club in the world.
In LA, right?
In LA.
Yeah.
And it's the type of club where, because of its location and its prestige and just how much comedians love it, and people love it, you can go there on any night and you will see, likely some A-list comedians just hanging out, going up on stage for 10 minutes. And I think that's what he's trying to do in Austin. He's trying to create like a new culture in Austin, basically.
Yeah. So you're there, you hear this guy, he's serving you a beer. You're like, huh.
Yeah. So, and then in the back of my mind, I was like, I should get into it. And in the meantime, I started watching, I got way into Mark Maron, who's a podcaster / comic who I used to really like. And then Patton Oswalt. I also got very much into him. And then fast forward to like the following year, like a year from then, July 3rd, I went to an open mic at this little place called Uptown Arts Bar. And I went there without having ever been to a comedy open mic. I brought a bunch of my friends, it was very cringy in hindsight. And I wrote 5 minutes of material before, and then I went up there, and I did well because my friends were in the audience, and I was like, wow, I have a gift. I'm ready or whatever. And then I didn't have a good set for years after that. Really, and that's the crappy thing about comedy, is that there is no way. When you start and you're just like in your 20s and you're just a dude who thinks he's funny, and you go to open mics and you're just trying everything. You're trying to emulate people you've seen. You're trying to be edgy, whatever. And it takes forever to get good at stand-up. And I would say that I'm good
trial
now.
And error, right?
It
You're
is
just literally testing things out on a crowd every single night.
It really is, yeah.
You bomb, you go home feeling like shit.
Yeah.
I just...
It's terrible.
And then you come back at it again.
Yeah.
Again.
But that was mixed in with my alcoholism. I would drink every night of the week, and I would be at a comedy open mic or a show every night of the week for a couple of years. And I would say that I'm good now at comedy, but I am constantly, and it's the same way with painting, anything that I was doing like a month ago, I'm already like, you're so much better than that now,
The growth curve is...
Yeah. So, I don't think I'm as funny as I'm going to be, but I've been doing it only 5 years. So, and I have just now started getting a following, through those Instagram reels, I've been trying to figure out the algorithm to get people to watch my shit, because when people do watch my shit, they follow me and they're like, this is my guy, and that's what I want. I want to build a community of that.
Yeah. Give your Instagram.
Bad.aaron.scarbrough on Instagram, or just go to aaronscarbrough.com as well.
Yeah.
That has everything on it.
Excellent. Yeah, you can catch I've been watching some of your posts on Instagram. Yeah, I like it. Funny.
Thank you.
Good. So how is there the craft of writing comedy? Is that something you do alone in private?
It's a combination of things.
And like, do you keep, like, as your day goes along, do you have a way to, like, you think?
I have a notepad in my phone.
Yeah, and so you keep notes in your phone, and you just
absolutely
just log like little crazy ideas that come to your brain every day.
So the more you do comedy, the better you get at recognizing, like, oh, that would work. Because when you first start, you're just throwing shit out there and hoping it sticks, like, because you haven't figured out how to, like, you haven't figured out timing or how to avoid making the audience, like, upset, or because, like, we've all been misunderstood by our body language or how we phrased something. I mean, just think about that under the pressure of, like, you're supposed to make the audience laugh, Mm-hmm. It's not open for interpretation. It's like the goal is to make them laugh. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. What I do, I write notes in my phone, and they're usually just a short phrase, and it's something that, like, I can understand the premise, and then I'll take that to either an open mic or I'll do it on a paid show. Like, I'll try to sandwich it in between two jokes that I know will work. I will sometimes, like, run it by a buddy of mine. Sometimes I'll tweet it, like, just to see if it works, like that. And then, you're constantly, even, like, sometimes, like, you'll be, like, performing and you're doing a joke that you've done hundreds of times. Mm-hmm. And then it'll just occur to you, oh, I've been saying this wrong. Mm-hmm. And that's why sometimes people get weird around that part. Mm-hmm. And you'll be like, problem solved. I don't know. It's not very organized because it's not like, I don't try to go into writing with, like, an agenda. Like, I'm going to write 3 jokes today, mm-hmm. or whatever. I've never had a good joke that came from that type of attitude. Good jokes tend to come from just experiences, and you think of something and you're like, oh, people could relate to this, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Feels forced if you're...
Yeah. And has there been any, I'm just curious, like, in terms of studying comedy, like, have there been, like, any influences on you that, like, is it just watching a lot of comedians at work that influenced you? Is there books that you've read from comedians that mm-hmm. influenced you?
Absolutely.
Like, what were some of the biggest influences?
So, my favorite comedian of all time is Norm Macdonald.
Okay.
And has been for years.
Interesting. Yeah.
So Norm Macdonald, there's things that you can learn from being a Norm Macdonald fan and mm-hmm. just watching him. Have you ever watched him on, like, Conan and stuff?
I've seen him.
Oh, he's just...
I think he's...
effortlessly...
The deadpan thing is just so classic,
And people are always shocked, like, how does Norm get away with saying that? And you can see, like, in his eyes, like, he's not a malicious person. He knows he has, no one is better at knowing where the line is than Norm Macdonald, because he would dance on it constantly.
Yeah. The line between offensive and funny.
Right. Yeah. And he also, something to learn from Norm is how he was a deeply flawed guy, terrible with money, had gambling addictions, and just kind of a screw up in that way. Like, I mean, we don't think of him that way because we're like, he was on SNL and stuff, but he was constantly running out of money and gambling it away and stuff. But there's, like, when you watch Norm, he's someone that like you can tell he's been through tough things. Like he's grounded, he's down to earth. And it's like what I'm saying, that connection you make with a fast food worker. I don't know. When you watch Norm, it's just like, this guy fucking gets it. You know, he knows what's important and what's not. And I don't know. You can tell that he just has the most fun. When you watch Norm, are you like, man, that guy's having fun?
I've always liked him.
He just makes you smile. It's just like, that guy.
I've always, the comedians, and I can't even come up with the names, but that I call it, I don't know if deadpan's a good term for that.
Sure.
But just the way he
he definitely used deadpan,
lines that were just, and it just, I don't know what it is about that style.
Yeah.
It just makes me, just the style itself sometimes makes me laugh.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to say anything.
You know something? He's also way smarter than he pretended to be.
Yeah.
You can tell by like his jokes are sometimes like they're street jokes or dad jokes or whatever, but you're like, no, he's in on the joke. Like when he says anything, he does these rambling long jokes that have to do with a farmer and his 3 daughters or whatever. And you're just like, this is something like I've basically heard before, but he thinks that it's funny to do that. He thinks it's funny to waste people's time with stupid details and stuff. He also, there's this one Norm bit that I'm not going to like recite the whole thing to you, but it's my favorite joke of all time, first of all. And second of all, like I've talked to this guy who opened for Norm while he was working on this bit, and he said he walked the audience constantly, on that tour. Like they got up and they're like, not doing it. But it wound up on one of his comedy albums, and it's this joke where he starts out by talking about the news. And he says that when I was a kid, the news was half an hour long. But now it's 24 hours long. It turns out back then they had it about right. There is a half an hour of news. And then he starts talking about how when people go missing, when there's a story about a woman has vanished, he goes through that scenario, and he's like, he says something about how if the camera shows the woods ever, you're like, oh no, not the woods. And then he goes from that into this bit, and this is where it gets dark. He goes into this bit about how he would murder a woman. He says, and I would never murder a woman in cold blood. And he's like, I know I say that now, but he goes through this whole scenario where he's stalking a woman in this hypothetical, stalking a woman, paying attention to her habits, and then he describes his crime, and it's perverse, of course, but it's the funniest joke I've ever heard. Yeah. Like if you listen to it, you're like, I can't believe he pulled that off. Like, and it worked. Yeah. It's good.
That's the way it is. It's amazing. There's such an art to it.
I love it.
I had a guy in my church that did what do they call it? The comedy club down the Improv down when it was in the River Key area, City Market area.
Okay.
They used to have a comedy improv comedy thing, and he did stand up improv.
No kidding.
And then we started doing comedy videos, like Fred's Day Off. Pastor Fred's Day Off, but just stupid shit.
Yeah.
And he would write it for us, and then I'd act.
Right.
Which I can't. But it was so cheesy that it was funny.
Right.
And he was he knew how to, like, he would get up on he knew how to, storyboard it.
Yeah.
And for comedy. It was so it was so, he had it. There was an art form that he had for how to storyboard comedy. It was so fascinating.
It's crazy, and before you do stand up, you have no idea how intricate it is, I'm sure that there's similarities with preaching, you have
to learn to tell a story to get
right.
You can fall flat, and then put people into stitches,
Mm-hmm.
What's one of I grew up listening to Cheech and Chong, which of course I couldn't have. I had to hide it from my folks, right? But that was my favorite stuff. But what's one of your early, let's just say one of your early jokes that you still love today, that really worked?
Early joke that I still love today.
That really worked, like it was one that you were like, oh wow, this is a gem, and that you don't mind redoing.
I mean, let me think. So, and this was like the first bit that I made that made any sense at all, because I didn't know how to talk. And I'm not, I don't stand behind this joke anymore, really, but I used to have a joke about how there's a strange hope when you have red hair and you're going bald at the same time, because you get sad that you have red hair and you're like, it'll be gone soon. And then you get sad that you're going bald and you're like, dude, it was red anyway, who cares? So, I mean, that's like, I've been doing that joke since year one. Uh-huh. So, I don't know. It's dumb.
Self-deprecation is always a great.
If you know how to do it, it is. I've definitely seen a lot of, and every new comic, that's your first 5 minutes is just tearing yourself apart. Mm-hmm. Everyone does that.
Do you think the British have a special gift for that? I'm just curious.
I don't know if the British. I don't think
I always wondered if they invented it. I didn't. It's self-deprecating humor. Seems like.
To be honest, Fred, I don't think the British are particularly strong in self-reflection, but they as a culture,
they could reciprocate.
They still have a fucking queen. Come on, reflect.
Did you watch her show that she just put on? Just her. The big stars. Queen let it off with,
no, I don't. I'm not very much into royal culture.
Well, you get Adam Lambert to open up for you,
right? My parents love old conservatives love royalty. Oh. They do.
Yeah, what would Noam Chomsky think about royalty?
That was a simpler time when it was easier to beat the working class into submission or whatever.
Isn't it an odd thing?
What?
The obsession that British still have with that, even though
it's very it's their tradition. Yeah. Uh-huh. Whatever I don't know.
Well, and the Americans seem to get all stoked about it too.
Well, I think having a king and queen made sense probably back when you were an empire that hadn't crumbled.
Everybody had one, right?
Yeah, the British are even less relevant than than we let on.
Oh, my British friends out there, we love you. All right, so hey, what about?
I'm sorry. Hey, I love you too, and I didn't mean any of that.
No. What about? So you're the progressive comedian of Kansas City.
Well, I didn't say that.
Oh, you did too.
No, I didn't.
Heard you say that.
Wait, when did I say? Did I say that?
Maybe you were
jest?
Stoned on your podcast and said it.
That doesn't sound like me.
Which your podcast is National Prayer Breakfast.
Yeah, you guys.
Which I've been to many times and helped sponsor the Middle East suite of the prayer breakfast.
You so I was set up some oil deals.
Curious about your choice of isn't that copyrighted? Can you just grab it?
You're the pastor who knows people at Raytheon. Good God.
I know people everywhere.
Yeah, I know you do.
Yeah. So why'd you pick National Prayer Breakfast as a name for your podcast? And talk about your progressive comedian streak.
So my podcast, the National Prayer Breakfast, is, or actually there's no I don't think it's National Prayer Breakfast. I do that with my girlfriend. My girlfriend's a very funny person, like, just on the fly, sometimes not meaning to be. She's hilarious. And I'm me. And the two of us, we just have a podcast where we smoke a lot of weed. I will try to talk about the CIA, and she will talk about hair and stuff. It's very random. The reason why we called it National Prayer Breakfast, we wanted it to be a nod to people who know what the National Prayer Breakfast is. So that being, leftists, basically. Of course, I know that other people know what the National Prayer Breakfast is, but we're more interested in like the corruption that goes on at the National Prayer Breakfast. It's a sarcastic name. Was that all the questions? Did I
like your progressive?
So here's the thing. With that, I understand that I come off sometimes like a mentally ill person when I talk about stuff like that, but I think that I don't know. It's just kind of who I am. Like, that's what I read. I read stuff like that. I like reading about Cold War politics, and war, and also covert operations and stuff like that. And naturally, that's kind of where my humor comes from. That's where I like to punch. I like to punch towards corporations, corporate elites, systems of power that are actually there. I think that it's gotten real too popular in the past, few years, since the Trump years. People say that Republicans fear their base and Democrats have contempt for their base. And I think that that's true. And I also think that sort of like punching at MAGA people, I think Trump is like a borderline fascist. Don't get me wrong. But I think that he has appealed to working class people that feel completely disillusioned and betrayed by the Democratic Party. So to me, it's a more fun perspective, and it's somewhat intentional. When I'm on stage, I like to make fun of liberal ideology, liberal, establishment liberals like Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, like these people, because that's an effective ground for comedy, because like you will reach leftists who feel the same way, which I'm convinced that most of us out here, we all want free healthcare at this point. We all want weed to be legalized federally. We all want the prisons to at the very least go under enormous reform.
Yeah.
We all want that. So that's the perspective that I try to push in my comedy. Mm-hmm. Because it's not so much, I don't have any delusions about how I'm going to sway anybody, mm-hmm. but at least I can, kind of have a community of people who like that, and laugh at it.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Well, and it's always, sometimes comedy, I don't know, comedy as at best, it makes you laugh at yourself, makes you laugh at, because you can go through some dark crap.
Yeah.
But at some point, even me, like now, I can, in the right crowd with the right people, I can make fun of myself this last 3 years that I've gone through.
Yeah. Well, people that have been through pain have a good sense of humor oftentimes.
I think.
Yeah.
And I had a friend one time, he says, you're a laugh or cry. And sometimes you do both, right?
Right.
But in the long run, I have to look back at my foibles and like, okay, and just kind of have fun with myself and poke fun at myself.
To me, it's the only way to live. It's the only way to live.
Yeah. So, and then my, I think about my politics, my religion, all of those things. Since I've gone through what I've gone through, I literally have kind of rethought, re-questioned, doubted everything.
Yeah.
Rebuilding as well, and kind of, charting off on some new territory. But
sure.
But in the long run, I do want to laugh at it all, poke fun at myself, and I think comedians help sometimes. If we can't laugh at our own self, and there's
suffering
wrong, right? And even I'm talking about even in like the institution. I built a church,
right?
It was a pretty big church, but if I can't poke fun at it, if I can't poke fun at myself,
right?
How I fell apart.
So many people like can't have a fucking sense of humor about themselves, and
about my former beliefs, my new belief. I don't know, and it's just. So comedy helps me out a lot.
Yeah,
it's therapeutic.
It's so good, and it will make you relate to and understand people that you would otherwise you have no hope of empathizing with or whatever. Like, that I don't know. It's so cool. Comedy, like comedians can be like. I have a friend who is just extreme polar opposite, like right-wing libertarian, and he's a dear friend of mine. We disagree. I think he's, wrong about stuff in general, but we're both comics. So we have that connection. So it's just like,
yeah.
We're both human. We both suffer.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us here on Spirituality Adventures. Let's help people out. If they want to go see you live in Kansas City, do they just go to your website?
Yeah, I would say go to the website. I don't know, when did you say this is going to drop?
This will drop in a week or two, so
okay.
It won't. I noticed you have something coming up Saturday.
Yeah, I've got.
I wish I could. I might try to go to that. But anyway,
that'll be a good show. Yeah, I would say just pay attention to the website, or just follow me on social media. Like, there will be stuff there, and that way you can always find my website and get ticket links and stuff like that. I'm working on a lot of stuff right now, and I'm still a painter. I paint every day of my life. I'm going to go paint after this. So, and
do you sell your art as well? And is that through your social media?
So I have like a merch thing through Redbubble, but I don't really. I'm grateful for anything. Whenever people support my artwork, and that's what that's there for. If you want to order, a print of a painting or whatever. That's great. But what I like to do most of all is just sell stuff from my Instagram, so I don't have to share the money with Redbubble, because they take most of it, when they handle the transaction and the production of it.
All those in between people take everybody's money.
Everyone
drives me crazy.
That's how this economy works, man. There's everyone is some version
survive off of other people.
They insert themselves, like a property manager will insert themselves because a landlord's lazy and doesn't want to do anything. They drive the price up, and they still are pricks about me whenever I'm late on rent. Anyway, but
So the podcast is on Spotify.
It's on like Google and Amazon as well. I don't think we're on Apple, but
AaronScarbrough.com. your bad Aaron Scarbrough on Instagram.
If you type in that'll come up. I mean, if you type in Aaron Scarbrough, it'll come up.
And shows mostly in the Midwest, right? Most of your live shows are in the Midwest.
As of right now, yeah. But I'm, I did Colorado this year. I do stuff in Nebraska, Kansas, Arkansas. I want to come down to Texas. I want to do New York this year, California. Like, that's going to be coming very soon.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, thanks, Aaron.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us on Spirituality Adventures, and we'll see you next time. This concludes today's episode. Thanks for tuning in and listening. Remember, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Remember to like, share, or subscribe to the social media platform that you're using. And then go to our website, spiritualityadventures.com, and make a one-time donation, or you can subscribe monthly and receive our special bonus content. Thanks so much.